So I'm a pediatric surgeon, and we deal with little ones. Uh, Even for prenatal surgical advice and surgical counseling, to 18 minus 1 day uh, teenagers, and truly, pediatric surgery for me is very special, especially taking care of the newborns with the newborn congenital anomalies, um, being able to help them, and then seeing them in follow-up growing and thriving. Most of them do well, and that's the magic of a lot of these little ones, is that they're so resilient and plastic and forever changing, in a good way. So that's what I do, sort of my day job, and sometimes my night job, being on call. But um, my other passion is for art, and I've always been, I guess, interested in painting. Since I was small, I took art lessons, and not because my parents told me to or anything. It's just that I gravitated towards it, and they just helped facilitate that. Um, yeah, different mediums. I've tried sculpting, I've tried all types, but I think I do like drawing and painting the most, just because you can more easily do it than sort of more extensive, like sculpting and so on, where you need special tools and all that stuff. But yeah, so when travel was easy, for me, art is also seeing what other art is about, and going to museums, and getting inspired by traveling, by travels, by seeing and by experiencing, sort of different cultures, different way of expressing that culture through art. I find fascinating. Um, but even during COVID, you didn't have to get far, you didn't have to get fancy. Even on your iPad, like, have this program, this app, it's called Procreate, and you can paint and draw, and it has different mediums, like you can have watercolor or oil and so on, but it's all clean. So you just use your iPad and your pencil that's provided with the iPad. So I find that very helpful if you just want to doodle and do fun things. And perhaps, art and surgery, there's certain similarities, obviously working with your hands, but when you're doing the painting or the drawing or doing the surgery, there's a focus and a stillness and a feeling, and you kind of go with the flow of things, and it takes you to different ways. I mean, obviously you have a purpose, but it's not necessarily always the same thing 100%. So you know where you're going to go, and sort of that focus, without being like, not a negative focus, is more of just a flow form, almost like a form of meditation in a way. So that's where time seems to be standing still, in the sense you could be spending 3-4 hours doing painting, and not realize 3 or 4 hours have gone by, and it just feels like maybe 10 minutes have gone by. So yeah, to me, that dreaming and is good, I think, for the soul. And so yeah, I mean, how do I see art? By traveling and the museums. It's certainly, it's curiosity, it's imagination. There's a sensitivity, and it's a sensitivity that it can be specific and unique to each person, but I find there's also collective sensitivities, in that there's a painting or a song or music. It doesn't necessarily be painting, but any type of art where it strikes the chord of many people. So obviously it's a common language, and it's that right side of our brain that you don't need to speak. You just need to feel. And I think that's what art does. To me, it brings out emotions. It brings out the beauty of the human form, the marvels of nature. That's the way I see it. And yeah, ever since I was small, I've painted, drawn, just did art for fun. Nothing professional or anything like that, but just for fun. Um, and and one of the paintings that I would call quote unquote my favorite, or the one that always fascinates me and always brings me back, is a painting in the Louvre. So before COVID, I've traveled a lot in Europe, and I would always, because most flights when you go to Europe have to go through Paris. So I would always stay a few days in Paris, and of course visit the Louvre. And it was a pilgrimage. Each time I would have to go see this painting, and it's called Le Naufrage de la Méduse, and it was painted or completed in 1819 by a French painter called Théodore Géricault. And I mean, when you see it, it's this ginormous painting, and when you just see it, you see the emotion of these people stranded on a little lifeboat, if you will, because their main boat had succumbed. And it's actually a true story. And what happened is that there were 160 of these passengers passed away, and about 17 ended up on this boat raft. And the captain knew that the boat was sinking, and the captain and the crew actually left on their own small little boat and left these poor people on this little boat raft to kind of fend for themselves. And sadly, the shore was only about 17 kilometers away, so it wasn't that far. And what happened eventually, that there was a British ship that came by and saved a few people. I think only 17 survived. And you can see, the despair of, this is a father and a son, holding his dead son. And then there's the hope of finding, land, which you could actually see in the distance. So it's just, there's the suffering, then there's the despair, then there's the hope. And to me, it just, when you see it in person, like for me, I just feel all these different emotions. And also the way it was painted at the time, it sounds kind of, in terms of the anatomy and the bodies, they actually used cadavers to study the shapes and so on for the paintings, which, it's a little piece of trivia. It's a little bit disturbing when you think about it, but it's also the way artists painted at that time, to get sort of the human form. So yeah, eventually when, post-COVID, when we have a better way of traveling, I'll go back and see this painting again, because to me, I find it a very fascinating painting. And then at the same time at the Louvre, there's, various eras and various styles, and you can spend like a whole week at least going through each section. But the one that is on the first floor, so when you go up to the Louvre, it's on the first floor. And at first it doesn't seem that big of a collection, and it's a little bit dark and so on, a dark in sense of the lighting. And the lighting is so that it protects the painting. There's a section on Egyptian antiquities, and you see the sign says Egyptian antiquities, and then you go through it and you're like, well, it doesn't feel that ancient. And so then it kind of struck me, like this painting of this young lady. It looks kind of modern. It doesn't look that the typical Egyptian antiquity that you would imagine at the time of the pharaohs, for example. So when you pay closer attention to it, it's actually encaustic on cedar wood with gilding, and it was thought to have been painted around 130 AD, and it's from the Antinopolis area of Egypt. It's very expressive, very human-like. There's a lot of detail. It's not two-dimensional. A lot of the paintings around that time perhaps were. And then there are other paintings similarly of a little boy, another woman, maybe not as detailed. And also at the British Museum, again, from a similar area in Egypt, around the same time frame. There's an amazing exposition of encaustic paintings at the British Museum as well. And what these beautiful encaustic portraits were used for were for funerary displays, and there were portraits of a deceased person. So I didn't know that at the time when I first saw them, because they were so lifelike. And they used the encaustic, or essentially what it is that it's beeswax melted and applied to an absorbent surface, and has pigments within it, and that's what gives it obviously the color. And then the wonderful thing about the beeswax is that it seals the surface you're painting on. So a lot of it is wood, but sometimes it could be linen, and it preserves it in a way so that it's watertight. So a lot of older ships used pigmented wax to make their ships watertight, and also for decorating. So if you imagine, a lot of these burial grounds were obviously underground, and had perhaps more humidity and so on. So having the beeswax paintings allowed a certain element of immortality, perhaps, to remembering those people that passed on. So the mummy portraits, as they were called, they were not for everybody, in the sense they were probably representing only the ruling elite. And it was at the time when the Roman Empire ruled Egypt. And a lot of the people, elite at that point, were Greek, of Greek ancestry, probably related to the army of Alexander the Great. And these mummy portraits were discovered originally by some Italian discoverers and an Austrian, and eventually some more Italian. And they were from the Fayum region. So that's why sometimes they're called the Fayum portraits. So Antinopolis, and when you look at closer, the other sort of vicinities around there. And the Fayum portraits, or these encaustic portraits, were really Greco-Roman painting traditions with a belief in the traditional Egyptian sort of afterlife. Even though they were made, in around 150, 130 AD, really they have almost a Renaissance-like artistry behind them, looking at the shadowing, the skin texture, the hair texture. They were very much lifelike, as opposed to two-dimensional. So it really struck me how almost modern they look, at the fact that they were so made in such an ancient time. So I always had sort of this idea of encaustic painting, but I didn't really know how you actually do it. And I get some of my paint supplies from Paint Spot, and about 6 years ago they had a weekend course. So they have many courses, and this one time they had an encaustic course taught by Jordan Pearson, who is actually a local Albertan artist who paints with encaustic. And after taking her course on the weekend, she'd give us the introductory, how to do it, the safety also behind it. I fell in love with it, and then I started painting with it. And just to put a little rah-rah for Jordan Pearson, I don't know her very well except from that course, but if you ever want to check out her artwork, it's really beautiful. She paints a lot of Alberta sort of wild scenes, and moose and bears, and all the wildlife and wild land that is out here. So it's really beautiful, and it's all with encaustic art. So it's really interesting, her technique and how she uses encaustic painting for that. So, I get my materials at the Paint Spot in Edmonton and Delta Art. It depends, what's available and so on. And the beeswax I get from the Skona market, the Old Strathcona Farmers Market. And it's important to use real natural beeswax as opposed to like paraffin, because paraffin, well, it just doesn't work. And it has other substances that you probably shouldn't be smelling for too long. And certainly the refined beeswax, it has a more white, translucent, see-through sort of abilities, versus the natural beeswax, which has more of a yellow tinge to it. Some of them that are pre-made, you can have the damar resin for durability and luminosity, but you can just use beeswax. And usually for the colors themselves, they're already pre-made. I mean, you can mix your own colors, but that takes a little bit more work, or you can buy them already in little blocks. And you also need fusing tools like a heat gun or a torch or an iron to melt the wax on either the wood or the linen that you're working on. And the brushes you use are natural bristles, like Hake or Sumi painting brushes. And the nice thing about wax is that you can build layers onto it, and you can scrape off your new yellow layer to reveal the old layer. So you can use tools for shaping and cutting. It's almost like sculpting, but with it you can add like gold leaf and so on. So, and photo transfers, and so it's very interesting for people who like to do collages or have mixed media kind of incorporation with the wax. So it's nice that way. Now, anytime you're burning things or you're melting things, there's fumes that go off, and you just need to make sure that you have good safety, having good ventilation, having windows open, having a fan going. And I have a fire extinguisher also, just in case. And obviously, when you're doing this, it has to feel right. You have to be kind of in the mood or in the zone, I guess, to paint. So, just listen to some good music and all that kind of stuff. So it's not just the tools, but it's also the environment, right? So, so yeah, that's how I got started. And so at first I kind of experimented with pictures that I took when I was traveling. And this is when I was traveling in Romania, and there was a little gypsy caravan going through. So this is dad and his daughter with a caravan. And I had taken that picture a while ago, and I incorporated the photo with some encaustic, and it just gives it kind of an airy, kind of dreamy maybe quality to it. And then, different travels. When I went to India, here's an elephant, very, very nice elephant, didn't escape. So, again, it's just fun. You can use gold leaf too to incorporate it, and you can use other types of paper like rice paper or any kind of paper with design on it that allows absorbency of the wax and transparency as well. So it can be really fun playing with different sort of media and incorporating with it. So and then I love gardening, and I end up having flowers, and I don't know what to do with them after they dry. So I used dried flowers into beeswax for the painting. Or sometimes, you receive wonderful flowers from caring people for whatever reason, and you want to kind of savor that that feeling, that comfort. And so so some of them are just from flowers that I received from people as well, and incorporating it into paintings. And here are some of my orchids that have gone on. And some of them are just flowers that I've had in my in my garden. And so probably 3 years ago, I was lucky to have an after hours exhibition just across the Macmillan Art Gallery at the University of Alberta Hospital. And it was called Bee Friendly, and just a awareness about bees, but also an awareness about encaustic painting. So that was very, good for me to highlight what the things that I can do, but also highlighting, I think, about bees and flowers, and especially about the scarcity of our bees. I'm not sure if it's climate change or what is going on, or insecticides, but certainly the importance of bees. Now, just to highlight the Macmillan Art Gallery and the space that they allowed me to use. So the After Hours exhibition is a space just across the art gallery, and I know some of the medical students have used it as well for their paintings, and other healthcare workers to highlight some of their work. I know there were some healthcare workers and other painters who painted around COVID and highlighted their artwork in the After Hours exhibition. So it's a great opportunity to highlight artwork in the hospital for not just for the patients, but for the people working in the hospital, for people visiting. So it's great because it's right beside the 112th Street exit or entrance, and it's a great way of highlighting some beautiful art by various people in the hospital. So the Friends of the University Hospital also fundraises through the art sales at the U of A Macmillan Art Gallery. And I think that's another important thing. I was happy to donate some for fundraising, and the fundraising is used to promote healing through the arts on the wards. I know in the pediatric wards, there's Child Life, but there's also that uses arts, but there's also the beautiful paintings that we have on display in the hospital that can help. And that's also through the Friends of University Hospital, through the Macmillan Art Gallery. There's also artists on the ward that help with patients, either painting or drawing, whether it's in pediatrics. I imagine on the adult world, they probably help a lot with some of the maybe neurological rehab as well, or any rehab for that matter. And I know there's a group of medical students that meet regularly to paint together. And again, they're amateurs, but it's fun, getting those artistic juices flowing, and just having the time to share your art. And honestly, and that's one thing that I miss about going to different art classes or workshops. I haven't since COVID. Is also because you get to meet other people and how they do their art, and just kind of comparing things, and it just gets the creative juices flowing, I think. So I have to say I have to applaud those medical students getting together. Also at the medical student level and the resident level and staff and allied health, there's a yearly Canadian Conference of Medical Education, and there's a section of it called White Coat, Warm Heart. And there's a yearly exhibition of different art forms by medical students or residents and staff, and they can be viewed through their art gallery. And there was a touching, COVID-19 gratitude and hope inspired art this year. So I'll tell you sort of maybe the process of perhaps of, how do I decide to paint what or how, and a lot of it is a bit of quirkiness, maybe something unusual, maybe something that struck me. And So in clinic, in our pediatric surgery clinic, one of the nurses that helps out in clinic, her aunt had this Queen Victoria agave plant for 35 years. So it's quite an old Queen Victoria agave plant. And I didn't know much about Queen Victoria agave plants until she told me about the story of this plant. And it's very unique in the sense that it's, as you can see, for a 35-year-old plant, it's not big, but it very slowly grows. So it's a mature plant. And then for whatever reason, it decides, and it decided in December 2019, this just before COVID, almost before COVID started, to sprout, you know, to sprout. And once it starts sprouting, it grows exponentially. In the span of 2 weeks, it grew up to almost a second story. And as it grows, that's this huge sprout, this huge long sprout, it makes these little flowers. And once it flowers, unfortunately, that's the end of this plant. And it's a very kind of rare event for it to flower. And it was actually in the newspaper. You know, after making these little pods, these flowers then become these little pods, and these little pods kind of fall off. So so I had asked the nurse to, you know, to ask her aunt to keep these pods for me because it was such an interesting story. So she collected them, let them dry, and then a year later, I got them back in December 2020. And so then I thought, well, what do I do with such a sticky mess, you know, once in a lifetime sticky mess? I was inspired by the beautiful watercolors of Dr. David Goodsell. He's a structural biologist in the States who does these wonderful paintings of cells and you know, mitochondria and all the interior portions of a cell. And when you first look at it, it looks like almost like a fantastical painting, but it's actually a true representation using like electron microscopy and his interpretation of what a cell looks like with its different you know, liposomes and mitochondria and so on and so forth. Cell membranes and cell proteins. And so he had done this for many years, his beautiful watercolors of different cells and viruses and bacteria and so on. And then he, using electron microscopy that was used to discover the COVID-19 virus and how it looked like, he interpreted it as this watercolor painting, and it became the cover for Nature for the COVID feature. So, I mean, obviously, you know, since COVID started, that's all we've been talking about. So to me, it really struck me. And, you know, to me, this is my COVID interpretation and my tribute to 2020 using those agave pods, which are quite rare and bloom only once every 35, 75 years. And once they do, unfortunately, the plant dies. So this is my encaustic tribute to 2020 using the Queen Victoria agave pods. With it, thinking of the sun and sunflowers as well. So there you go. That's how I was inspired by that plant. And then, yeah, also dreaming of my summer garden. I sort of the background that I have in the background is a painting that I did a little while ago. Some of my irises too. They're beautiful colors and they're shimmering, you know, petals. And that's what I find about the wax, and because you can polish it and you can use sort of different colors and so on, and it has a glittering, shiny quality to it. So it reflects light beautifully, almost like the petals would, for example, if you were outside in the sun. So yeah, I mean, everybody needs to get creative, and sometimes you see things very concretely, and other times, you know, you just have to close your eyes and see things in a different way. This is just an image that I got off from Twitter. I thought it was kind of cool. It's, you know, you can see the landscape and then the beautiful moon, but it could also be other things too, like an eye, or, you know, anyway. But so yeah, nature is very inspirational, to find beautiful things to paint. So I'm not sure if everybody wants to do this, but you're welcome to. I was thinking of just maybe taking a few minutes, and if people have maybe you know, a little paper and a 2B pencil, because it's usually easier, or whatever thing you like to draw with, something that flows easily. And certainly for me, like, I find that I need to set time aside, and I just set, you know, like for me, sometimes a Sunday afternoon, I'll set a good 4 or 5 hours that is just for me. And you just have to be kind of in that mood, and not be rushed or not be interrupted, because otherwise it's just, to me, for me, it doesn't work. Um, and at first I kind of think, well, what do I thinking of? What do I want to paint? And I just kind of sit and I listen to music, and then you know, I close my eyes and I take a few breaths, and you can do the same if you wish. Yeah, maybe think of one of your favorite pictures that you've taken. Maybe it's a picture of a loved one, maybe a cherished pet, maybe a cat, dog, um, maybe a beautiful flower or landscape. And if you focus on that picture and you imagine being there, and you know, and how you felt when you were there with maybe that loved one, maybe with your little pet, or maybe in the beautiful landscape. And then, you know, open your eyes and then kind of search for that picture wherever it may be. Maybe you have a physical picture of it, maybe it's in your Photoshop somewhere. And I just keep that picture open, and I just start drawing it with just the 2B pencil, just free flowing. Um, and you know, you pick up different details each time you look at the picture, each time you look at your own drawing as you're doing it. You're kind of going this back and forth, and you're focusing on different things. And at one part just notice, oh well, maybe that's not exactly what it looks like, but that's okay. You just kind of paint or draw over it. Like, don't erase it, because you start erasing, then it kind of breaks it up. And so just maybe have a thicker stroke over the part that you think you want to correct, and then it will correct itself. And then it, you know, you can start off with one area, then kind of build on, and then as you're building on, you may notice different tones of color and how you want to shade that. Or maybe you don't want to shade it, maybe you just want to do that rough sketch and that's what it is. And perhaps there's movement in it, so if there's movement in it, maybe you can relay that in the stroke that you have of your pencil, or how light or how dark it might be. So yeah, I think, you know, if you spend maybe 10-20 minutes just kind of doing that, but without overthinking it, because if you think too much about it, it stops the creativeness, I think, of it. But it's just that focus sort of back and forth between seeing the painting or the picture and your drawing, and how it relates to how you feel. And usually you kind of know your you're in the moment, like you'll just kind of add more details as you see fit, and you're concentrated, but at the same time it's very fluid. And at one point, you'll know you'll be finished because it will just feel right that you're finished. And it doesn't have to be finished in the sense that it's perfect, or that you have all the details, but you've extracted kind of the essential. And that's the thing, like you just want to extract the essential for maybe 20 minutes or so. And then after you have your rough draft with the pencil drawing, and then after, well, this is what I do, then I go on to the painting, and then that gives me the structure for the painting. And the painting doesn't have to be that you do, it doesn't have to be encaustic. It can be whatever your favorite medium is. Like for me, I admire people who do watercolor because I find it so not forgiving. Like once I put the watercolor, it's there and it's like, oh, did I want that? I'm not sure. So depending on the medium, it gives you more flexibility or not. And sometimes just a pencil drawing can be, even if it's just a sketch, can be have more emotion and more sort of more, I guess, description of what you are trying to draw and express yourself, than a super detailed painting, if I'm expressing myself correctly. But yeah, sometimes just having the drawing can be the art form itself. So yeah. Now, obviously, this is a unique creative exercise for everybody, and everybody has their own way of doing things, but this is one way to start, if you're wondering. And truly, I think, we stress of doing physical exercise. What do they say? 35 minutes, or is it 30 minutes? I can't remember. Anyway, or is it, anyway, I think it's 30 minutes, 5 times a week. Yeah, but that's it. 30 minutes, 5 times a week. So, physical exercise is important for the body, also for the mind, but so is art, whether it's, painting or music or, the theater, anything where the brain, the right side of the brain is being used. And traditionally, in medicine, we're very left brain geared. We're very logical. We have strategies, we have facts, we have details, and we have deadlines, and a lot of us also are right-handed, so it's sort of, our left brain kind of dominates a lot. But importantly, our right brain is extremely important, and there needs to be a balance. And it's that right side that gives us the creativity, the visualization, the imagination, the intuition. And you think, well, what does that have to do with surgery? Well, for example, when we're, besides working with your hands, which is obvious, but when we're doing surgery, we don't just kind of start doing surgery. Where, for example, if there is a tumor of the liver, for example, we get, for example, a CT scan before we do surgery, and there's contrast used for the CT scan, so we know where the arteries and the veins and the portal vein and the biliary tree. So we understand the relationship of the tumor that's in the liver that we're going to resect with all the other different arteries and veins and biliary tree. And when we look at the CT scan, we scroll it up and down, up and down. And as we're doing it, we're imagining in our head, what is this going to look like when we'll be operating, for example? And so there is that visualization in surgery that that needs to be done, and that imagination, so that you're planning, so if you're planning for surgery, like what if you get into this situation and you need to tie out that artery or that vein and so on. So it's certainly, we need to use, at least in surgery and other parts of medicine too, we need to use that visualization to try to understand what we do next in terms of surgical planning. Also, what do we call intuition? Well, for example, when you're rounding on the wards, if you're a medical student, you're rounding with your staff on the wards, and you're presenting a case, and your staff will say, oh, this patient, like within 2 minutes, your staff says, this patient has meningitis. I don't know. We'll pick a topic, and you say, well, how do they know? A lot of it is built-in experience. So we have patterns of recognition in medicine, not just surgery, but in medicine in general. We have patterns of recognition of different diseases, and as a staff person, we're able, because we've had that experience, our intuition is all those different presentations that were once the left side and were analytical, that they've been sort of transferred over to the right, and then you're able to see things before maybe people who haven't had as much experience to see it. So that's what that right-sided intuition is all about. So we definitely need that balance, and we need to exercise both the left and the right, but because we exercise the left so much, we need to uplift the right side of the brain. So hence for me, it's painting. For others, it might be music. For others, it might be poetry. It might be writing, theater. Anything that will use the right side is a good thing. So, and one of the, there's many fascinating books about the brain and how the brain works. But one of the more touching ones that I've read not too long ago is by Jill Taylor. She wrote My Stroke of Insight. So she's actually a doctor, like a PhD doctor. She's not a physician, but she has a PhD in neurosciences. And unfortunately, I think she was in her mid-30s. She had a massive stroke, and as she was experiencing this stroke, was able to document later the experience that she had, and she had a left-sided stroke, and so thereafter her right side was sort of taking over, and how she felt about the concept of time, and how she felt about visual information, and how she could be very aware of these, but yet she couldn't pick up the phone to call for help and so on. So it's just fascinating how she was able to remember all these, and also relearn how to write, how to talk. So it took her 8 years of healing until she was able to write her book, and express how her left dominant brain unfortunately suffered a stroke, and how she became really right dominant and had to relearn, and thankfully for plasticity, a lot of the left-sided things that she used to do before. So it's a fascinating book of how we need sort of this balance between right and left, and how important it is to have the art world in our life. So certainly, kids are very plastic in their thinking. I got this from Twitter. It's really funny. It says, write 5 words you can spell. So the little kiddo writes 5 words you can spell. Anyway, I thought it was cute. So so this tells us about the right left brain plasticity, what's concrete, what's abstract, and how we can be creative in our solutions. Only kids can do this anyway. And talking about kids, and talking about sort of using our right and left brains and lessons learned is one of my favorite books of all times is Le Petit Prince, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And I read this when I was a kid, and it's a sweet story of this little prince who lands on Earth and misses his home planet. That's sort of the base level kind of kid story. And then I've reread it a number of times as an adult, and each time that I read it as an adult, I extract more meaning about the story, and I think everyone kind of extracts what they want to. I think so. I'm not going to tell you what I extracted, but if you ever have the chance to read it, it's not just a children's book, but I mean, children will love it too. It has lots of pictures, and the story about it is, fantastical. And but as an adult, it definitely has very, very meaningful, um, uh, you know, um, truths. And for example, one of them, it says, all big people were at once, or at one point, children, but few of them remember this. So that's my translation of it. So, when a little kid reads that, yeah, okay, but when an adult reads that, well, it strings, it touches different strings in your heart. And so to me, this book is so special. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think honestly, I've been very fortunate to be a pediatric surgeon, to be who I am so far in life. And really, I think each child has such significance when they're born, and really having the joy of living and experiencing that, I think through the arts is wonderful. And this is a real quote, like a real photograph I took when I was visiting Japan a little while ago. And it really struck a chord to me, this particular phrase. So yeah, and I think I'd like to thank everybody just for showing up, and giving me the opportunity to share with you some of my encaustic creativity, I guess. And I wish you creative moments, many creative moments in the future, but especially in the present. That's the most important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bratu. That was great. If you want, we can open it up for some questions for a few minutes and then go from there. What would you prefer?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. And if anyone is more comfortable typing in the chat, I'm monitoring that as well, so I can read out questions if they come in through the chat. Okay, I see one in the chat. Does practicing medicine and art together give you a different perspective on surgery compared to other physicians?
Yeah, I mean, I could just speak for myself. It's hard to know what other people are experiencing, but I know in medicine, it's easy to get. I mean, because medicine is busy, it can fill up your days, and it can fill up your nights. So it's easy to fall into the work of medicine, and forget about the the other parts of life. And I find that having the ability to experience the arts um, is a way of having that time that you need to reflect on it. It is a form of meditation in a way, but it's like you're doing meditation, you're painting meditation, and it has a way of for me at least, it gives me a different perspective. It gives me solutions to questions or problems that I may have. I mean, the problem doesn't just, or the question or the solution doesn't just pop up right there and there, but maybe a few days later, maybe a week later. So certainly, I think making the time for artistic purposes is important, at least for me, because it makes me, I think, function better as a surgeon. So just like I think doing exercise can help you also to think more clearly, to feel better in terms of your musculoskeletal. Um, and I guess specifically for art, like the visualization and those concepts, I guess, yeah, it might give me a, maybe a better way of understanding the 3D representation of what it's like to do surgery. But yeah, I hope that answered your question.
I think Dr. Brett McLean might have a question as well. I'll see if she types it in the chat, or she might. Oh, there she is.
Hi, lovely to see you, Dr. Bratu, and lovely presentation. Thank you so much. Manisha, thank you for organizing all of this and having us all together. Listening to your presentation and all of your wonderful artwork reminded me of a time, brought back to mind a time that, I'm trying to think, it would have been maybe in 2009, so it's going back some time ago, when the Arts and Humanities and Health Medicine program partnered with the Macmillan Gallery, and we held an exhibition that was called After Work, and which are you familiar with that? Do you recall that? Or is that?
No, I came to U of A in 2007, so I'm not sure. I may have passed by, but
Right.
yeah.
So what we thought, it was around the time that the Art Gallery of Alberta the new building was being created. And so there was a moment in time they welcomed all of the public to come in with their artwork, and it was hung, up and down the walls of the old art gallery building, and for a period of time. And that inspired us to invite everyone who, as a health professional, health student, on and on, to anybody who's working in the hospital or in healthcare settings, to bring their art forward. And it was juried. We weren't able to accept everybody, but we accepted tons of work. And so it was kind of similar, sort of jam-packed. But to see all of the creative expression of many people that you would never think maybe about, the passions that engage them in the arts this way. So I'll just put in the chat, actually. We ended up, oh, there it is. We ended up reviewing the artist statements that everybody had made and kind of did a qualitative analysis. And it emerged that happiness was an element, and sort of the wellness, well-being aspect, but sometimes there were very particular motivations. So somebody in radiology shared that they engaged in it just to be immersed in color, because there was so much of their days that they were restricted in that way. So one thing I'm sorry that we didn't end up including in the article was the impact of the responses of the the viewers, because we had many quotes as well, and I think that's so important to have your work experienced as well as we're experiencing your work right now. So importance to have creativity and the different ways of thinking and give you that fresh eye, all very important. But my sense too is that this contributes much to your life and your satisfaction. And if you wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying, the happiness, and there's certainly a feeling of time standing still and just being there, just doing. And yes, there is that sense of happiness. Like at the end, like you don't feel used or exhausted. You feel happy, and it's true. Doing something, and people say do something fun. It's not just fun. Like fun is like maybe light. It's not light. It's true. I guess, yeah, happiness. That's the word. And I think any art form that brings happiness to the person is good for the well-being, to work out through this. Yeah.
And to others. Yeah. And bringing happiness to others to appreciate
the experience.
What we're seeing. That helps us reminds us to take those moments to really see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Pam, I know you're also involved with the medical students. I know I'm horrible with the titles. I'm sorry, but they had like a gallery presentation this year, correct? Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure, just very briefly. And then we can ask the students who participated in that what their
Yes.
experience of it has been, perhaps. And that is at the as part of the patient immersion experience that we have at the University of Alberta. Medical students are paired with patient mentors or matched with patient mentors over a 2-year period where they co-visit and they learn about living with chronic medical conditions. And then at the latter half of the second year, um, the students are assigned a project where they are to gather to find a group somehow amongst themselves to collaborate on a project that will make visible in some way something significant that they learned over the 2 years, and to share that in a public context, which over the last 2 years has been virtually, and we've had a virtual opening. Did you participate in that? Or did you?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Oh, great.
I mean,
Okay.
to look, I didn't paint or anything, but just, yeah, to look.
Yes, yes. So yeah, so for many of our students now, some groups can do arts-based approaches or speculative design or any sort of creative approach. It just can't be a summary of data on a poster. So kind of outside of a usual, what do you call it, comfort zone, perhaps. And that may be something that might be interesting to hear from the students about their experience of that.
I can comment on it a little bit. I think one thing I love about the PI experience is that the intention is to create art for a purpose. Like the idea is you start with you brainstorm together. What did we learn from our patients? What was it that changed inside ourselves in response? What sort of message do we want to communicate? And then found creative approaches to be able to communicate those, which I think is even different than what we've been talking about today, maybe, because today we've been talking about art practice that's like beautiful for personal growth and that doesn't necessarily have to say a specific message, but just overall brings joy and enjoyment and beauty. And the pie projects are really interesting because they almost start from a different point. They start at, what are we trying to say? And then how can we use like this new way to communicate it? So I really enjoyed that, and also the collaboration part of the Pride projects. I found really, really neat that you're creating something as a group. And maybe that's my question for Dr. Bratu. Do you have any experience in doing collaborative work, and do you have thoughts about that? And yeah.
Yeah, no, I think for me speaking, when I paint, I usually paint by myself, unless I'm taking a workshop or an art class, and then there's a group of us and painting together. And but I think getting together in a group and having like a group project like you were describing, that has a purpose of setting a message, I think that can be very powerful for the people that are doing the project. I guess it was the medical students and the patient, because I think they both benefit from it, and also other people viewing, they get a glimpse of that, what you're trying to express to them. So yes, so for me, I've only been sort of, it's more of my own individual, I guess, enjoyment more than anything. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed when the first part of your presentation, but when did you start sharing your work with the larger world?
Yeah.
And what was that like? Because that, one can be a very personal sort of experience.
Yes.
And when you share
yes
with others, that's another interesting
it is
layer.
So I'll tell you the more personal stories. So so back in 2017, I mean, I've always been painting and so on. I had a lot of paintings and so on, but back in 2017, I was diagnosed with an atrial septal defect, and I was feeling tired all the time. I didn't know what was wrong, and I thought I was just getting old and doing too much call. So, you know, I had my atrial septal defect repaired and so on, and I felt much better after that. And I had taken 3 months off to heal and all that kind of stuff. And during those 3 months, you know, I can't just sit still at home. And so I painted some more. So, and then when I got back, you know, I showed my friends my paintings, and one of the pediatric oncology nurse practitioners, anyway, we were just hanging out, and I showed her some of my stuff, and then she says, "Oh, you know, that's nice," you know, and I'm like, "Okay, yeah." And my other pediatric anesthesia friends, so they got together, and somehow they kind of signed me up and asked whether I could showcase my art. And then I spoke to the gallery. So it was through their encouragement that I spoke with the gallery if I could. And they helped me put together the little exhibition that we had there. So, and a lot of the flowers actually used were flowers that I had received when, well, you know, when I was trying to heal. So, so that's I don't know, I didn't say it to everybody, but that was how the ball started rolling. And it was a little bit terrifying because I never shared my artwork. So, you know, just with close people, whatever. But like to have it out there, yeah, it's a little bit, I'm like, oh, I don't know, what if nobody likes it, or, you know, rejection or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those things. But I'm glad I did it. It was, part of it was sort of the bond that you build with the people that support you to bring it out. And to me, it just had special meaning because of my own healing, sort of my own physical healing journey, but I guess it had definitely an emotional part to it as well. So, yeah.
That's interesting. And I won't take too much longer. I'm sure others have other interesting questions to ask, but my dissertation was actually on people who came to art in later life, but closer to retirement. But it sounds like there was a moment that offered an opening, and you took this up, and then it's led to many additional new aspects of your life. But I remember that one of the people who took this up when they were close to retirement, it was an unanticipated retirement because of health issues themselves, and he referred to it. He was also a doctor here at UAH. It's going back many years now. But he said art saved his life, in fact. So yeah, so we think of art being healing in interesting ways or helping with the recovery process, but yeah, it can be really, really significant. And I'll just share too that Steph, who asked the earlier question and commented on the Interpreter Project, curated our last 2 exhibitions, and I've put those links up, and is an artist herself, and was an artist before she came into medicine. So there's lots of ways of making the connection between the two.
Yes.
And it's another extra plug for Steph. She also designed our Obliquity logo. So
Oh, wonderful.
She's very talented.
Yes, that's wonderful. Yes.
And Sarah is here as well, and she curated the most recent exhibition that was online. But I think I think it's just so interesting, the things that we may not expect of each other, that when we learn more, there's so much amazing things that we can share with each other, inspire each other.
Yes.
Perfect. I'll give one more last call out for any questions or comments, and then if not, I'll quickly share my screen to give a quick blurb about our next Obliquity session. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see that? Perfect. So our next session is going to be on August 16th, the same time from 6 to 8 p.m. And Sarah, who's on the call still, will actually be facilitating this session because Dr. Del Maestro is her research supervisor. And interestingly, Sarah, feel free to jump in at any point if you want to add anything. But so Dr. Del Maestro is going to give us this presentation, Poetry, Art, and Neurosurgery, A Search for Meaning. And he actually owns, I think, one of the largest, if not the largest, private collections of Leonardo da Vinci works. So we'll hear a little bit about that, I'm sure. And Sarah will be facilitating that presentation. So we're really excited to welcome Dr. Del Maestro next. And thank you so much, Dr. Bratu. This was a lovely session. I know everyone really enjoyed it, and we're very happy that you were able to join us. Thank you.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. Have a good night.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Bratu. That got very inspired.
Oh, thank you guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
And continue painting and drawing.